I'm sorry, 1239 is where we should be.
Okay.
You need the question again?
Oh, I don't see this in evidence.
It is not yet, Your Honor.
Okay.
I am not familiar with this document.
Okay. This is an email, though, between Apple employees, or appears to be in your understanding, including Mr. Schiller and Mr. Federighi.
That's what it appears to be.
Okay, and the bottom of the first page mentions Schiller, right?
It says that.
Okay, and I'll represent that this is what follows that italics is actually a copy from the Wired article that is mentioned in the text. And I really want to point you to one thing on page 2.
I'm on page 2.
Okay, and if you look at paragraph 5, it reads, and I'm going to read this because it's from the Wired article, Wardle notified Apple about the rogue software on August 28th, and the company revoked the Schleyer notarization certificates that same day, neutering the malware anywhere that it was installed and for future downloads. Do you see that?
I see that.
Malicious software constantly changes, and Apple's notarization system helps us keep malware off the Mac and allow us to respond quickly when it's discovered, this company said in a statement. On learning of this adware, we revoked the identified variant, disabled the developer account, and revoked the associated certificate. We thank the researchers for their assistance and keeping our users safe. Do you see that?
I see that.
Is that consistent with your understanding of how notarization works on the Mac?
This is more of a recovery from a notarization problem as opposed to how notarization works.
It's a statement from Apple, though, right?
It is.
So you would defer to their explanation of how notarization works?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, here's demonstratives that show the various distribution methods. There was one that was direct, one that was centralized, one that was multiple app stores. None of those depicted the notarization process, right?
Right.
I'd like to change topics and go to the iOS threat model. You believe, and you understand what I mean by threat model, right? It's addressing the indirect testimony?
I do.
Okay. You believe it's industry best practice for device manufacturers to perform a formal security analysis of a product before bringing it to market, right? And a formal security analysis includes developing a threat model, right?
It is part of it.
And a threat model would enumerate vulnerabilities, weaknesses, and defects in any computer system.
That would be part of it.
Okay. Is that it, though?
No.
Okay. Well, the threat model would do this, would enumerate vulnerabilities, weaknesses, and defects, right?
It would.
Okay. And you believe that any evaluation of the security of iOS must consider the threat model, right?
I think an evaluation of a system needs to include a threat model.
A system including iOS, isn't that right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, in preparation for developing your opinions, as you've discussed previously, you had access to Apple engineers, right? Okay. And you spoke with several individuals to gather information informing your opinions, right?
I did.
That include, as we said, Mr. Kosminka, right?
Yes.
Mr. Eric Friedman?
Yes.
He runs the Apple Fraud Engineering Algorithms and Risk team, is that right?
Right.
And there may have been others, right?
I think so.
Okay. You would not discuss with any of these people whether Apple had performed a formal security analysis before the iPhone was brought to market, right?
I did not discuss that.
Okay. And you did not discuss with these people, these Apple engineers, whether Apple developed a threat model before the iPhone was brought to market, right?
I did not have that discussion.
And you also had access to confidential Apple documents. I believe you testified that you signed a protective order earlier.
Yes.
And that obviously Apple could have given you those documents how they chose, right?
I suppose so.
And you remember at your deposition, I asked you if you had seen contemporaneous documentation of Apple having performed a security analysis or developed a threat model before bringing iPhone to market. Do you remember me asking you that?
I do. I remember not understanding what contemporaneous meant.
Okay. Eventually we got there. Didn't we eventually get to the clear question?
We did.
Okay. And you were not able to identify one at that point. Isn't that right?
That's right.
Now, another step in a security analysis is the construction of a set of policy invariants, right?
Yes.
Policy invariants describe how the system is supposed to function as envisioned by its creators and stakeholders, right?
Yes.
And in this case, the creators and stakeholders refer to the people who developed the iPhone, right?
Yes.
Did you even ask anybody at Apple for their set of policy invariants for the iPhone, right?
Right.
You didn't see any such policy invariants for the iPhone, right?
Right.
You just assumed based on those conversations you had that they had created policy invariants. Isn't that right?
Right.
Now you believe iOS faces an extraordinary threat model, right?
An extraordinary threat.
It has an extraordinary threat model, right?
Yes.
Okay. And this threat model, in your view, has caused Apple to employ extraordinary security features, right?
Yes.
And that includes, as you described it, centralized app distribution, right?
Yes.
One reason you believe iPhone has an extraordinary threat model is the number of apps available in the App Store today, right?
That's true.
Okay. 2 million today, right? We're almost.
I've heard that in this case.
Okay, and you've actually testified to that in this case, haven't you?
I may have.
Okay, all right, thanks. Another reason for the extraordinary threat model of the iPhone is the number of app downloads per day, right?
Yes.
In your view, correct?
Yes.
Now, if there were evidence in the case that Apple had no reason to believe that there would be this many apps or this many app downloads when they launched the App Store, those numbers could not have affected the development of an iPhone threat model before it was launched, right?
I'd like you to please clarify that question.
Yeah, sure. So if Apple didn't know before they launched the iPhone that there would be 2 million apps and 180 million app downloads, and they didn't know that when they launched the App Store, those numbers could not have affected their development of a threat model, right?
Not necessarily.
Let me try it again. If there's evidence that these numbers were never contemplated by Apple at the time they launched the App Store, they could not have possibly taken those numbers into account when they developed a threat model they launched the App Store, right?
If they never contemplated it, they wouldn't have put it in their threat model.
Okay, thank you. Another reason you believe the iPhone has an extraordinary threat model is that it has hardware features that could expose a user in private moments, right?
Yes.
For example, iPhones have built-in microphones, right?
Yes.
They have built-in cameras, right?
Yes.
The Mac also has a built-in camera, though, right?
Right.
And the Mac also has a built-in microphone, right?
Yes.
Macs also have a hardware that could expose a user in private moments, right?
There'll be fewer private moments, but yeah.
That is correct, right?
Yes.
Okay. And one reason, in your opinion, there are fewer private moments is where the device goes with the user, right?
Right.
But Macs obviously are with users in their most private moments, right?
Mine isn't. I don't know.
Okay, so you don't know whether users use Macs in their most private moments?
I would imagine they don't.
Okay. Are you prepared to testify on your oath that they don't?
No, I mean, I'm being a little tongue-in-cheek because I think that it's pretty clear that your phone is with you in more sensitive times than your Mac is.
Okay, so could you just focus on my questions, please?
Sure.
Some people might use Mac in the office, right?
Yes.
While they're working on confidential business, right? Okay. Some people might use Macs at home in their living rooms, right?
They could.
Some people might even use Macs at home in their bedrooms, right?
They could.
Okay, and these are private moments, right?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, when comparing threat models, such as between the iPhone and Mac, you would have to take into account the types of information that people store on these devices, right?
Yes.
And you'd agree that if one of the products stored more information than the other, then the threat models would be less similar than if they stored the same information, correct?
Yes.
In fact, if Mac stored the same kind of information as iPhones did, that would affect your comparison of those threat models, right?
If it was exactly the same,
Is it yes or no?
let me please hear it again.
Sure. Whether Macs store the same information or similar information would be a factor you consider when comparing their threat models, right?
Yes.
Okay. But you haven't conducted any empirical study to compare the types of information that people keep on their iPhone versus their Mac, have you?
I'm a very heavy user of both, so I have an idea.
Okay, but sir, the question was you haven't conducted an empirical study of that, have you?
I have not.
Okay. You do agree, however, that people can sync information between their Macs and their iPhones?
Yes.
Okay. Like their photos they can sync, right?
Yes.
Their calendar information they can sync?
Yes.
Their contact information they can sync?
Yes.
You're also aware that people can store their passwords in iCloud, right?
Yes.
And they can also store credit card information in iCloud, right?
Yes.
And information that is stored on iCloud can be accessed on any Apple device.
Yes.
Including the Mac and the iPhone.
Yeah, those two. Yeah.
Okay, at least those two, right?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Users can also use their Apple devices to access their same email and their messages on separate devices, right?
They can.
Including on Macs and iPhones, right?
Yes.
And you'd agree that people have sensitive information in their email, right?
They can.
In your opinion, however, users cannot sync the most sensitive information that is kept on iOS, right?
Right.
That sensitive information includes payment information that is used for Apple Pay, right?
That's right.
It also includes biometric information that is used for Touch ID.
Yes.
And biometric information that is used for Face ID, right?
Yes.
That information is on a special chip in an iPhone called the Secure Enclave, right?
Enclave, yes.
Enclave, thank you. I was going to ask you if you knew. I did not. The Secure Enclave is designed to provide an extra layer of protection to this most sensitive information, right?
Yes.
The Secure Enclave is designed to keep the information secure even if the application processor on the iPhone is compromised, right?
Yes.
The application processor is another chip that runs applications on the iPhone, right?
Yes.
Mac computers being sold today also have a Secure Enclave, right?
Yes.
Mac computers being sold today also offer Touch ID, right? Some of them do. Some of the Mac computers being sold today offer Touch ID, right?
Yes.
And these Mac computers would store the same kind of biometric information that would be stored on the iPhone for Touch ID, right?
Yes.
And Apple Pay is also available on Mac computers being sold today, right?
Yes.
Now, another reason you believe the iPhone threat model is extraordinary is that iOS devices have sensor hardware that tracks their users' location and movement patterns, right?
Yes.
Macs also can detect the device's location, right?
Not as well.
But they can do so, right?
To a general approximation.
Okay. And Mac apps and websites can gather and use this location information that is identified by the Mac, right?
Right.
I want to talk about one of the other aspects of your iPhone security model, which is automated manual review. One of the opinions you offer in this case is that AppReview provides significant security benefits, right?
I just don't know what you mean by automated manual review.
Okay. Perhaps we can work it out. Do you have your rebuttal expert report in front of you? It was in one of the coils. I'm sorry, you're so burdened with so much paper.
It's challenging with this microphone and the mouse.
I understand.
Okay, I've got it.
And could you please go to paragraph 99? Are you with me?
Yes.
And you say here, I attribute iOS security to 4 aspects of its security model, right?
Right.
And we went over those earlier, one of which is the manual and automated app review process, right?
Right. I didn't hear you say the word "and," so I got the confusion.
It's probably the multiple layers of plastic between us, I would guess, and I'll slow down a little too. So app review enforces the app review guidelines, right?
Yes,
That's its directive, is to do that, from your understanding, is that right?
that's right.
Some of the app review guidelines have a primary focus on something other than security, isn't that right?
That's correct.
And you'd expect that app review enforces those guidelines too, right?
Yes.
Now, I saw on your demonstrative, and as you described your assignment on direct, you said that one aspect was to generate real-life data, or to gather real-life data. Is that right?
That was part of my assignment.
And you also were meant to evaluate app review, right, and the security benefits it provides, right?
Yes.
But you haven't done any empirical analysis of the security of apps that are actually distributed through the App Store, have you?
I haven't done a review like that.
Okay, you haven't done an empirical analysis, right?
Right.
And you haven't done an empirical analysis of the privacy of apps that are distributed right now through app review, have you?
Right. That wasn't my assignment.
Okay. And you haven't done any empirical analysis of the reliability of apps distributed through the App Store. Is that right?
That's correct.
Now, Mr. Friedman, who runs Apple's Steer team, is one of the employees that you talked to when developing your opinions, right?
That's correct.
Now, I notice you haven't addressed the evidence that Mr. Friedman offered in this case. Is that right?
I'm sorry, I haven't addressed it
In your testimony, have you?
I don't think I did.
Okay, so you didn't address Mr. Friedman's observation that app review was bringing a plastic butter knife to a gunfight, have you?
I didn't address that.
You didn't address Mr. Friedman's view to another Apple employee. The employee should regard app review as a little more than the equivalent of the TSA at the airport, did you?
I didn't address that.
You're familiar with what a KPI is?
I might need some context.
Okay, what about key performance indicator? Does that help?
Sure.
Okay. You didn't address Mr. Freeman's finding in the last 2 years that app review's KPI is how many apps we can get through the pipe, right?
I didn't address that.
Okay, Mr. Freeman's view that app review was not being measured by what exotic exploits can app review detect, right?
Right. I used Mr. Kuzminka for my understanding of the app review process.
Okay, and you ignored what Mr. Freeman had to say, right?
No, because he and I spoke about other things.
Okay, you didn't speak about this evidence that he offered in this case?
Slow down, sir.
I'm sorry, Your Honor.
No.
Okay. Now, of the 4 aspects of the iOS security model that we just went over again, you would agree that manual and automated app review is the one that is most directly related to the need for exclusive distribution, right?
I think that's a fair comment.
Okay. Let's talk about the automated portion of app review now. That includes static and dynamic analysis, right?
Right.
Those are common techniques in computer security, right?
Yes.
You'd agree that these have an enormous impact on the security of the system, right?
They are able to identify many problems.
They have an enormous impact on security, isn't that right?
Yes.
But in terms of time and cost needed to use them, they are negligible. Isn't that right?
In the larger scheme of things, they run pretty quickly.
Okay. Let's talk about manual review now. With respect to manual review, other app stores could implement a manual review, right?
They can't do Apple's, but they could do one.
Okay, they could do a manual review.
Yes.
And if they had all of Apple's resources and all of Apple's money, they could put in their own manual review process, right?
They would still need access to Apple's knowledge base and their familiarity with their platform, but if you cloned Apple and made another Apple...
I'm sorry, I'm on a clock and I just wanted to get you now. Right?
Sure.
If they had the money and resources that Apple did, they could implement their own manual process, right?
They might need more.
Okay, so could I, Your Honor, may I refer the witness to his deposition, page 109, line 25, page 110, line 6. Okay, so when you asked this question and did you give this answer? Question: they could implement their own human manual review process in order to determine whether the apps they distribute meet those guidelines, right? Answer: I think if they put in the time and the resources and the money that it would take to develop it the way Apple did, then they could do that. Did I read that correctly?
You did.
Do you stand by that answer?
I think about it some more. I think they would need more.
So you don't stand by that answer?
I would revise that answer.
Okay. In fact, though, you have not actually assessed whether or not another app store could have put in the investment had they been allowed to participate in the iOS ecosystem, right?
I don't think there are companies that are too many companies in a position to put in that investment.
Okay. So you haven't actually made an assessment of that, have you?
I mean, I follow the news. I know Apple is the largest company in the world, so I haven't done any analysis like that.
Well, let me ask you a different question. You actually haven't conducted any empirical analysis of the amount of resources that Apple puts into app review, right?
I have not done a study like that.
Okay. You haven't done any study at all that I described, right?
That's what I said.
Okay. And you've not compared the amount of resources that Apple puts into app review with any other app store, have you?
Slow down again, Mr. Barnes.
I'm so sorry, Ryan.
I did compare it to the way Google's app review goes, looking at some confidential documents.
But you did not compare the amount of resources that Apple puts in to app review compared to any other app store. Isn't that right?
In paragraph 57 of my written direct, I do compare the resources that they put in.
Your Honor, I'd like to refer the witness to page 93, lines 14 through 25 in his deposition.
Go ahead.
So when you asked this question and did you give this answer? And so have you conducted any empirical analysis of the amounts of resources that Apple puts into app review compared to other app stores or app distributors? Answer: with my various conversations, I'm just going to use first names, Tristan and other Apple engineers, I got a sense of the amount of effort and time they put in, but I have not compared them to Google. Question: okay, have you compared it to any other app store? Answer: no. Did you give those answers?
I gave those answers.
Okay, you stand by those answers?
I would revise that answer.
Okay, this is another answer that you would revise?
Yes.
Okay.
5 minutes.
Thank you, Your Honor. In fact, you have no understanding of how much money Apple puts into Conduct, right?
I don't know that number.
In fact, you don't know the financials, do you?
I don't.
Okay. Nor do you know, nor have you looked at what another hypothetical app store that was allowed to participate in iOS could do or would have done, have you?
Could you please repeat the question?
Sure. You have not looked at what another hypothetical app store that were allowed on iOS would have or could do. Isn't that right?
What they would have?
Yes. What tools they would have, for example?
Yeah.
This now calls for testimony that was stricken under the court's order last night.
Yeah, I'm not talking about incentives. I'm talking about resources.
Well, then you better rephrase your question, otherwise you're going to open a door and he's going to be allowed to answer.
Thank you for that warning, Ron. I'll move on. Sir, you would agree that Apple sells security and privacy as a brand, right?
Yes.
Other app stores that were allowed to participate in iOS could also, if they wished, sell security and privacy as a brand.
I suppose they could.
And other app stores could educate people about what steps they were taking to protect people, right?
They could try.
They could, couldn't they?
Yes.
Okay. They could publish statistics, for example, about the number of bad apps that they provide compared to others, right?
They could do that.
Sir, you've expressed the opinion, correct me if I'm wrong, that bad apps distributed by another app store might be blamed on the device manufacturer compared to the app store that distributed it, right?
Right.
Okay, that's your view, isn't it?
Yes.
And you gave an example, if you recall, the Baby Shaker app. Do you recall that?
I do.
Okay, and that was an app, an iOS app, right?
Yes.
They went through app review, right?
Yes.
And there was an app that had a picture of a baby on it, kind of crudely drawn, right?
I haven't seen it, but I understand that there was some image of a baby.
Okay, and if you shook the image of a baby hard enough, there would be red X's over the baby's eyes, right?
Right.
And you use this as an example of people blaming a bad app on the device maker as opposed to the app distributor, right?
Right.
If you haven't actually looked at another example of this, for example, in the Android ecosystem, right?
I didn't give an example in my report.
This is the only example you gave, right?
Yes.
But in the Android ecosystem, you could in fact have a bad app that came from an app store that was not affiliated with the device maker, that was not affiliated with the operating system maker, right? You could. It could be a Google OS, Android, right? Samsung device, right?
Sure.
And say Aptoid App Store, right?
It could be.
And you could have done a study to determine which app store or device maker or Android or operating system maker would be blamed for a bad app, right?
I don't think I could do a study like that.
Well, you haven't done a study, right?
Right.
In fact, you could have done a study like this. You could have tested this hypothesis, right?
I don't do survey research. I wouldn't know how to do that study.
Okay, that's not your area of expertise, right?
I am an expert on security of mobile platforms, but not on conducting surveys. So I would, if I needed a survey like that, I would find someone to do that survey.
Okay, so instead you used an example without conducting the survey, right?
I used an example to clarify the point I was making.
Okay. And the point you were making, to be clear, is that people are necessarily going to blame the device maker for a bad app on their phone, right?
I wasn't saying necessarily. I was saying some people will blame it.
Okay, and the only example you came up with is a bad app. It was on an Apple phone and also got through Apple App Review, right?
That's the example I gave.
Okay. You want to just maybe a good place to stop?
How much more do you have?
I would say at least 20, 25 minutes, Your Honor.
Okay. All right, and you understand, Mr. Rubin, that the first witness for tomorrow will be Mr. Cook?
I'm aware.
Okay. During the break, you were instructed not to speak to anyone, including the lawyers or anyone else, with respect to your testimony. Do you understand?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Unfortunately, I don't know if there's a basketball game on or something, but you can't do anything with respect to this case. You understand?
I understand.
Okay. At least not with anyone else. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Let's. You can step down at this point. Let me see. I have some information now. Mr. Dorn, Ms. Forrest. So I obviously haven't read what was handed up to me by Ms. Forrest with respect to the deposition testimony.
In terms of the deposition, two things. First of all, I would also cite the court to 403-14 to 17.
Hold on, let me get a
Yes,
minute.
Your Honor.
I gave away both my copies, so,
You can have this one
all right,
back.
thank you.
All right, so
403-14 to 17.
Mr. Dawn.
And the second site is 315-16 to 20. No, I'm sorry, I went in reverse order there.
Okay. All right, and Ms. Forrest, here you've got page 81.
Yes, lines 18 to 21. And Your Honor, if it would be of any assistance, I can walk very briefly through the thinking and the line of reasoning.